tales of whatever presents, the conclusion of the beast beneath the blanket. Chapter 7. The Requiem of Forgetting. The feast of the beast began, as it always did, with fire. Before sunrise, the town was already alight with celebration. Lanterns shaped like claws and fangs swung from iron hooks. Crimson and gold banners snapped above balconies. Children in painted masks skipped behind drummers, their feet tapping out an ancient rhythm. A bonfire roared in the town square. Grotesque papier-mâché effigies filled every nook and cranny. The townsfolk attacked them with toy swords, and once reduced to tatters, tossed the remains into the flames. Sophie moved unnoticed through the crowd. She wore a green hooded cloak with gold trim. Scarlet lay strapped to her back, cradled like a secret. Her fingers flexed in a nervous rhythm. Her lips formed silent notes. Across the square, Hannah spotted her and waved, beaming beside the statue of the night. Sophie offered a small, brief wave in return, her face barely changing. Then, the mayor called her name. Cheers erupted. "Tonight," the mayor proclaimed, "young Sophie gifts us a new composition, written in honor of our most cherished tradition." Applause surged. Sophie climbed the stage. Firelight flickered across the sea of faces. All eyes turned toward her. The wind bit her cheeks. She opened Scarlet's case, tuned the strings with steady hands, and raised the violin to her chin. Then she played. The first note slipped into the square like breath on cold glass. The melody spiraled and curled back on itself, a tune that seemed to forget its own shape. At first the crowd stood still. Then a foot tapped. A shoulder swayed. A man danced toward the bonfire, tore the mask from his face, and hurled it into the flames with a dramatic spin. The local school teacher plucked down a banner and waltzed with it, guiding it gently into the fire. The music crept through the square like fog, wrapping itself into corners and crevices. Someone laughed and tore garlands from a chapel window. Another scaled a ladder to pull down ribbons from the bell tower. The townspeople moved, not with joy, but with a strange, solemn grace. They danced, yes, but as if pulled by invisible strings. Some resisted, most did not. Still, Sophie played. Each phrase unraveled tradition, thread by thread. The crowd surrendered completely. Some danced alone, others in pairs or circles. Larger groups wove through alleys and homes. Cabinets opened, drawers emptied. Keepsakes were gathered like offerings. The entire town moved to the music, feeding the fire anything that might preserve memory. Masks, banners, songbooks, carvings, ribbons. All of it burned. Every symbol of the feast was gone. It was beautiful, but dreadful. Then the notes emanating from Scarlet came to an end. The final note trembled in the air, and the spellbound dancers ceased their movement and bowed graciously to one another. The spell had broken. Confusion rippled through them. Some blinked, dazed. Others looked toward Sophie, bewildered, even alarmed, as though realizing too late that something had been stolen from their person. Sophie's chest rose and fell. She lowered her bow. Then, in her mind, the beast's voice coiled like smoke. "Play the second movement." Her fingers trembled. Slowly she raised the bow again. The second melody leapt from the strings, bright, lilting, sweet. Applause broke out. Laughter returned. The crowd reformed, as if drawn by instinct. The notes flowed too easily. Her arm moved without will. Her foot tapped with eerie precision. She was playing, but no longer in control. The music gripped her just as it gripped them. The crowd swayed, smiling. They clapped and hummed along, though none knew the tune. Sophie's gaze drifted toward the gate. There, a figure stood beyond the threshold, tall, motionless. At first she thought it was a tree, twisted and lifeless. Then it moved. Antlers, huge, bone, white, branching towards the early dawn sky, like lightning. The buck. A chill stabbed her. Snap. A string on scarlet broke. It whipped across her cheek, leaving a bright, stinging line. She gasped, stumbled. Her eyes shot to the gate. The silhouette was gone. Only snow and trees remained, quiet, still. The music stopped, and Sophie stood on the stage, alone. Chapter 8. The Spirit of Silence. Applause rippled through the square, slow at first, then faster, brighter, as the second spell loosened its grip on the people. Voices cheered, feet stamped. Laughter returned like sunlight after fog. The festival burned around them, vivid, glowing hollow. Paper masks crumbled in bonfires. Songs were sung with missing verses. Revelers toasted to traditions they no longer understood. And in the center of it all, Sophie stood very still. Scarlet hung limp at her side. A red line cut across her cheek where the string had snapped. Her chest rose and fell too fast. Her eyes swept the crowd, searching, though she didn't know for what. But the music had done its work. They had forgotten. She stepped down from the stage like a ghost among the living, and placed Scarlet alongside the instruments of the other musicians. She felt that Scarlet would be safe and concealed. She moved to the large bonfire and opened her satchel. From within, she pulled the old leather journal, the night's record, the garden's secret. She stared at it one final time, then tossed it into the flames. The fire caught instantly. Sophie turned from the fire and slipped through the crowd and out the gate into the forest. Dawn had come, and the light of the sun began to break over the horizon and through the trees. Snow drifted quietly from the sky, blanketing the earth in a hush. The wall drowned the ruckus of the merriment, and the forest loomed ahead, tall, solemn, silent. She checked the ground for tracks. Nothing. No hoof prints. No broken twigs. No sign of the thing she'd seen. She told herself it wasn't real. And then she ran. Northward, past familiar trees and frostbitten stones, all the way to the entrance of the garden. She arrived at the great oak, not knowing what to expect on the other side. She said a silent prayer before continuing. But something had watched her arrival. She felt it behind her like a sentinel. She turned. A shape waited in a clearing between the trees. At first, it resembled a statue, tall, still, draped in snow. Then it moved. It shook its massive head and body. The snow flew into the air, like dust shaken from a corpse. What stood beneath made Sophie's stomach turn. It had the shape of a stag, but its proportions were wrong. Legs too long, body too narrow. Dried moss clung to its ribs. Its oversized antlers had layers of dead vines and thorns, knotted and snarled around them. Its skin was patchy, and the rot long since desiccated. The mask of its face was made of bone, its eyes round, dark and hollow. It was the buck, but it is corrupted. Sophie ran. The thing shrieked, a noise like ice fracturing under pressure, and charged. Branches snapped behind her. Trees blurred past. Her boots slipped on dead leaves and snow. She reached the climbing tree and scrambled up its limbs, bark tearing at her hands. The stag slammed into the trunk behind her. She was almost knocked off, but was able to hold on. She scurried up to the main branch and stepped out onto it. The stag rammed the tree again. This jolt knocked her sideways. She landed hard on the limb that bridged to the oak, breath punched from her lungs. She clung to the branch, arms and legs wrapped around it, heart hammering. Below, the creature snarled. It scraped at the ground with a splintered hoof and threw itself against the tree again, shaking loose snow and bark. Sophie pushed herself back to her feet and hurried across the bridge of branches and reached the oak. The stag reared back and leapt in vain to gore her from the ground. Its antlers struck the bark just below her boots. She climbed higher, through the breach, and fell, tumbling into the garden. She lay on the snowy ground, panting. The blanket was still there. The shape underneath was smaller now. She sprinted toward it, breath catching in her throat. I played the pieces right, I know I did. But something's chasing me, she cried, her voice trembling. From beneath the wool, a voice replied, dry, brittle, and calm. You played both pieces to perfection, said the beast. Truly, I'm impressed. You are extraordinary. Then why are you still here? What was that thing in the forest? Sophie's voice cracked into a desperate bleat. A pause, then cold and final. Poor little Sophia, you must die with me. Why? She gasped. Outside the garden wall, branches cracked like thunder. Hooves scraped stone. Antlers raked bark. The creature was climbing. Sophie spun toward the sound, eyes wide. Help me, she cried. The beast replied coldly. My dear, you are the last, the only soul who still remembers me. And so long as you remain, so do I. The second melody you played, it carried a hidden call, a summons. Another crack, then a thud. The abomination hauled itself onto the top of the wall. Its limbs flailed in every direction, scrambling for purchase. With a sudden lurch, its hooves caught on the inner ridge, and it heaved its body over with terrifying strength. Then, with a sickening thud, it toppled over the edge and crashed into the garden below. Sophie turned and ran, looking for a place to hide. Behind her, the beast called out, You could throw yourself into the pond. That might be kinder. The cruelty cut like ice. Tears sprang to Sophie's eyes as she ran. Perhaps the pond was her only hope. She reached the water's edge and stepped onto the low retaining wall. The ice looked black beneath the snow. She slid onto it. It groaned but held. Step by step, she edged toward the center. Her arms stretched wide for balance. The cold seeped into her bones. Behind her, the stag watched. It stepped onto the ice. One hoof punched through. It yanked its leg free with a horrible snarl, teeth clicking in frustration. Sophie kept shuffling to the center of the ice. The creature began to back up. It turned, and after a few trots, broke into a gallop. It moved in a wide arc, first away, then directly towards Sophie. When it reached the pond's edge, it leapt. Sophie slipped. She fell to her hands and knees and scrambled on all fours away from certain death. The thing landed within inches. The ice shattered and a wave of water slammed over Sophie, pushing her forward. The creature thrashed after her, massive, drenched. It smashed through the ice again and again with its hooves, trying to climb back up. She crawled towards dry ground, staying ahead of the drowning stag. By the time she reached the opposite edge of the pond, the creature was losing its fight against the abyss. Sophie collapsed onto the snow, gasping. She watched the beast's antlers flick one last time above the surface, then sink into the water. The pond stilled. Silence returned. She stood up, her knees knocked together as she rose. She staggered to the blanket, soaked to the bone, hands blue with cold. "You betrayed me," she shouted, voice ragged. "I promised I'd never tell anyone, and I meant it." Snow swirled. The garden moaned with wind. "Lie here with me," said the beast. "This garden is a tomb worthy of you. Let the cold take you. We will fade away together." Her limbs started to go numb. Her hair stiffened into icy ropes. Her cloak froze to her back. She whispered, "No." "Or," said the beast, "you can wrap yourself in the blanket and live." She hesitated. She was no knight. She was only a girl who keeps her promise and deserves to live. Her fingers closed around the blanket's edge. With her eyes closed tightly, she pulled the blue wool blanket over her shoulders. Warmth. She sobbed as she prepared to finally cast eyes onto the beast. Beneath where the blanket had lain for so long was a crooked crack of perfect blackness. The shape stirred, unfolding, rising. It became a shadow. The beast slithered free, moving like living ink. In an instant it shifted, formless, then beastly. It advanced like a predator, paw, hoof, claw, its limbs changing with every step. Its tail flicked, reshaping mid-motion. Deep red eyes burned like embers in charcoal. It crept slowly, steady and deliberate. When it was close enough, it leaned in and whispered, "God be with thee, Sophia." Then, with a sudden surge, it unfurled two wings and leapt over her. Sophie looked down to where the blanket once lay. A hole remained, shimmering like a well full of stars. It grew, slowly expanding in all directions. When Sophie's strength finally gave out, she collapsed, and the watery, starry void caught her. When she woke, the sky was dark grey and purple. Sophie was still fighting sleep as she rose to her feet. The well was gone. The garden was still. The pond frozen once more. The beast was nowhere to be seen. She was dry and warm. She climbed the oak and crossed back into the forest. Chapter 9. The Poster. Sophie returned home with the blanket folded tightly beneath her cloak. Snow melted in her hair. The hearth in their cottage glowed bright, flames dancing in the grate. But Sophie sat without speaking, her eyes distant, her fingers unmoving. In the days that followed, the town returned to its rhythms. No one spoke of the feast, not the missing decorations, nor the strange music. nor the fire that burned too long into the night. The songs Sophie had played were forgotten. The effigies and masks gone without remark, except for the whispers. They came quietly at first. "I saw something near the orchard," muttered a baker. "My dog growled at a shadow. Wouldn't go past," said a farmer. "A fox," someone shrugged. "Or a stray. Nothing more." But no one could agree. One described fur, another feathers. One saw tusks, another hooves. Always different. Sophie said nothing, but she felt it too. That shadow on the edge of the woods. The hush that fell on certain roads. The cold that bit harder some nights. Then, one evening, as frost crawled across the windows, she turned to Hannah. "Can you draw something for me?" Hannah glanced up from her sketchbook. "What kind of something?" "A creature," Sophie said. "Not a real one. Something believable. Scary, but not too scary." Hannah tilted her head. "Why?" "If you draw it," Sophie said softly, "I'll tell you where I've really been playing Scarlet." That got her attention. Hannah narrowed her eyes. "You've been lying?" "Not really. Just hiding something." Hannah said nothing for a moment. Then she nodded. "Okay, let's make your monster." They sat at the kitchen table, tea steaming between them. Sophie described the creature in careful detail, but never mentioned the garden, the blanket, or the songs that could erase memory. She told only what she had to, just enough. And Hannah understood more than Sophie said. Together, they made the poster. They used parchment blackened slightly at the edges, aged with soot. At the top, they copied the town's crest. In the center, Hannah's drawing took shape. Something part wolf, part shadow. Long claws. A mouth too wide, stretching into a silent grin. Below it, wanted, dead, for killing livestock. Reward issued by mayor's office. Hannah had to copy the official seal. She outdid herself. The forgeries were immaculate. They made 5 copies. That night, they moved through the sleeping town like whispers. They pinned one to the bakery door, another to the smithy's wall, one on the chapel steps, one at the general store, and the last on the mayor's podium. The next day, the posters were still up. No one tore them down. No one asked questions. But someone had read them. Roan. He stood before the smithy's board at dawn, his father's old spear in hand. Snow clung to his boots. His breath smoked in the chill air. He studied the drawing carefully, eyes narrowed, jaw tight. Then, without a word, he folded the poster into his coat and turned toward the woods. Sophie watched from across the square. At first she smiled. Then the smile faded. She tightened her grip on the blanket beneath her cloak, heart sinking. Roan believed he was hunting a wolf or a wildcat, but Sophie knew better. The beast had not vanished. Not yet. Chapter 10. Cursed Coda. The next day, the town square hummed with gossip. The young hunter had returned. He crossed through the gate in the early afternoon hours, dragging something behind him beneath a canvas sheet. He walked with a stiff, uneven gait, as if every step cost him effort. His coat hung awkwardly, one side darker from a hidden stain. The crowd gathered quickly, drawn by curiosity and the air of finality in his stride. Sophie pushed to the front. As murmurs filled the air, Sophie and Hannah moved closer. Up close, Roan looked pale and worn. He shifted his weight from foot to foot, as if something on his back pained him. Hannah frowned. "You're hurt," she said. Roan gave a faint shake of the head. "Nothing serious. Just a scratch. I went out tracking it. For the reward. Figured if I caught it, I could help my folks get through the winter. But it wasn't me who found it. It found me. Caught me off guard. Whatever it wasn't just wild. It was furious. Like it knew me. Like it hated me. I managed to kill it, but not before it got a good swipe in. It fought harder than anything I've ever seen." "Let me see," Hannah said, already reaching gently toward his shoulder. "No need." But Hannah was already tugging at the tears in his tunic. The fabric had been shredded across the back. She pulled it slightly apart, revealing 4 long, bright red gashes ran from Roan's left shoulder to his lower ribs, red and raw. But what made Sophie freeze wasn't just the wound. It was what the scratches cut through. An uneven line of birthmarks, each about the size of a coin, that also trailed diagonally across his back, from shoulder to ribs. They were spaced in a long, uneven line. Like animal tracks. Their pattern had always seemed random. Until now. Sophie remembered the summer before, when they'd gone swimming at the river with Hannah and the others. Roan had taken off his shirt and dove into the water, and Sophie had noticed the strange arrangement of brown marks. She'd found them endearing at the time, quirky, like a constellation stretched across his skin. When she asked him about them later, he'd just shrugged and said, "Had 'em since I was a baby. That's why my folks called me Roan." Then he'd grinned sheepishly. "My real name's Kalen, but nobody calls me that except my mum, when she is serious." Now, the wound had slashed straight through them. Sophie stepped closer, her breath catching, but the sight struck her harder than she expected. She recoiled slightly, turning her face away with what looked like disgust. Her eyes squeezed shut. "It's not that bad," Hannah said gently, misreading her expression. "They're not deep, but they need to be cleaned." Sophie said nothing. She kept her face averted, refusing to look again. Her mind flinched away from the shape of it. From the way the slashes ran through the birthmarks, they became notes on a musical staff carved into his back. If there was a melody there, she didn't want to know what it sounded like. She would tell no one, not Hannah, not even Roan. Whatever truth that wound revealed, it belonged only to her. A town guard pulled back the top of the canvas and exposed the wretched creature, gaunt, matted, gangly limbs, eyes hollow and dark. It didn't match the poster exactly. Or maybe it did. "That's it," said a baker. "That's the thing I saw near the orchard." "No," said an old woman. "I remember it as more of a goat, or a sheep. Something with hooves, maybe." "I saw feathers," someone whispered. "No face, just wings and feathers." The hunter said nothing. He looked only at Sophie. She met his eyes and whispered, "I'm so sorry." "There's no need to be sorry, Sophie," he responded. The creature's body was displayed for a time. Then, the mayor, confused but proud, ordered it buried in the old field beyond the wall. Sophie begged the officials to bury it, wrapped up in the blue blanket that she had at home. They took the blanket. There was no ceremony, no marker. Kalen left with the mayor to accept his reward. Hannah demanded that Sophie explain everything, and Sophie assured her that she would. But she needed to show her the garden first. They departed immediately. Sophie took Hannah to the secret garden behind the oak. Broken branches were scattered around the roots, results of the corrupted stag's savagery. The secret garden was still and pale beneath a cloudy sky. Hannah was in awe. Sophie led Hannah to the pond and told her the whole story. "This is the truth," she said. Hannah sat on the stone bench, bewildered by the sights and the story. Sophie pointed to the water's edge. "That's where the stag went under, right there." Hannah leaned forward to look. The pond was silent, still crusted with thin ice. And while Hannah peered into the depths, Sophie quietly took Scarlet from her case. "This is so hard to believe," Hannah whispered. At that, Sophie began to play the Song of Forgetfulness one last time. The end.
And so concludes our story. Please stay tuned for more Tales of Whatever.